Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. If your photos are looking flat, lacking contrast, depth, and that beautiful sense of light, and you'd rather them look like this, then you've come to the right video. Because today I'm breaking down a powerful 5-step Lightroom technique that has been a game changer to my editing process. These steps have helped me bring life and dimension to every one of my photos, taking them from ordinary to eye-catching. And make sure to stick around to the end where I show you how I took this flat, low contrast blue hour shot to this beautifully lit sunset image. I hope you all enjoy. My name is Jalen Oban. I'm a landscape photographer and educator based in the Pacific Northwest. I create weekly videos giving you photo tips or taking you with me on location to give you a behind the scenes look at what I do. If you enjoy the content, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe. Before we start making adjustments to our image, the first thing is to pinpoint where the light is coming from in your scene. Every photo has a light source, whether that be the sunlight, a window, or just ambient light in your scene. Identifying it helps guide every edit we make moving forward. Now let's open up our image and see how the light interacts with certain elements. Now I have warmed up this image just a little bit to bring some nice sunlight back into the scene. But here we can see the light primarily enters from the left-hand side, softly illuminating the mountain peak and drawing our attention to that area. To emphasize this, head over to the masking menu and we'll use a radial filter and place it over the left side of the frame where the main light is entering. Make sure to feather this quite a bit to soften it up. I'll then increase the exposure slightly, decrease the dehaze, and warm it up a bit. Not to brighten, but to create a visual reminder of where the light is coming from and to enhance that sunlight that wasn't very present in the original image. Really spend some time studying that light source. Is it harsh and creating harsh, sharp shadows, or is it soft and diffused? In Lightroom, use the radial filter as a quick spotlight tool to visualize where the sunlight is coming from, even if you decide to take it away later. This step may seem simple, but knowing your light source gives direction to your edits. It ensures you're building on the direction of natural light instead of fighting it. Now that we know where the light is coming from, let's figure out how it's going to interact with different parts of our scene. Questions to ask yourself when figuring this out is, does it create contrast, does it emphasize certain textures, and does it add depth? For this image, the light softly grazes over the peaks and the foreground rocks, creating natural highlights and shadows. However, down in the valley, I want to really emphasize that contrast of the sunlight as well. To enhance this effect, I'll start by creating a brush mask and gently paint over the areas that the sun would normally directly be hitting if it were shining bright. For my scene, this would be to the left-hand side of the hills in the valley and the left-hand side of the fire lookout foundation. I also like to add this effect to the foreground of this image to lead the viewer's eye through the scene. Next, apply some exposure, a bit of warmth to enhance that sunlight effect, and just a tiny bit of clarity to really bring out some contrast and add some texture. Think of these highlights as the place where the light in your scene touches the landscape most intensely. Use this as a natural guideline for your viewer's eye through your scene. The next thing we can do to exaggerate that contrast is then to darken down the opposite side of the area we just brightened up. Using the brush tool again, we can identify which areas of the scene would be out of light or in shadow. For example, the other side of this hill. Using a brush mask, we can paint over that area. Next, decrease the exposure just by a little bit. Now that we have that mask created and edited, we can adjust other parts of our scene by just adding to the mask. So let's add a brush mask. Another area I want to make sure is darker is the right side of the fire lookout, the opposite side that we brightened up. And lastly, to draw the viewer's eye more into the scene, we can add a linear gradient and drag it up from the bottom and maybe tilt it a bit to cover the rest of the foreground. This helps as to not distract the viewer by darkening down the edge of the scene, acting as a vignette. Shadows add depth and dimension. They prevent your image from looking flat and really highlight the direction of light. Every landscape has areas that naturally draw the eye, and adjusting highlights and shadows enhances this visual journey without taking away from the scene's realism. For the third step, let's dive into the types of light that we're working with. Light in landscape photography can vary by quite a bit. There's hard light, soft light, and even ambient light that reflects off of other surfaces as well as clouds. In this scene, there's hard light that we use the brush tool to directly brighten and warm. However, there's also light that is soft and indirect, likely diffused by the clouds. This creates a gentle, even lighting across the image with minimal harsh shadows. To work with this soft light, placing a radial gradient and adding some clarity and exposure can help make those areas pop. Soft light doesn't need heavy-handed clarity adjustments, so I'll increase it just a little to define the mountain textures without overdoing it. You can also add a bit of warmth again if you'd like. Next, I'll add a touch of negative dehaze. Soft light can sometimes look a little diffused, so a subtle negative dehaze adjustment reduces some contrast and adds a dreamy, rich look to the scene. Do this for all of the areas which the light may not directly be impacting or touching your landscape. Soft light is forgiving and has a dreamy, ethereal look, but when used heavy-handedly can really wash out the colors in your image, so be careful when adjusting this. Hard light, by contrast, benefits from a more aggressive approach with clarity and exposure to enhance overly intense contrast. Understanding your light allows you to pick the correct tools when adjusting it in Lightroom. Soft light calls for gentle adjustments, while hard light may require a more controlled approach. Moving on to step 4, one of the most overlooked parts of adjusting your light is the opposite, the shadows and darkness in your scene. Light alone won't give the image depth. Shadows help create contrast and focus. Like mentioned before, identifying the areas that the light would not hit is our first step. In this image, there's already a good amount of natural shadow, especially in the foreground rocks. Using the adjustment brush, I selectively darken areas in the foreground and around the edges. This adds a subtle vignette effect, drawing attention to the lighter, central part of the image. Little areas like the crevice or curve in the rock, or even areas on top of the rock. You can use this brush to darken down parts of the image you don't want the viewer to look at. I also like to add a linear gradient to the top of the sky and darken it down to create a vignette. However, when adjusting the shadows, make sure to not over-darken them, as this can lead to the loss of detail. Shadows and blacks are essential for creating a visual frame that guides the viewer's eye to the areas of interest. Be mindful of not crushing the blacks too much. Aim for a balance between contrast and detail. Balancing light with shadow creates a foundation for a dynamic, layered image. Shadows don't just add mood, they complement and elevate your highlights. Now for our last step, let's bring it all together by enhancing the light in our main area of focus. This is where we can guide the viewer's eye more intentionally. For this image, I want the viewer's eye to lead to the lookout point and then the mountain, and stay in frame as long as possible. I can do this by using a radial filter and place it over the lookout area to create a focal point. I'll increase the exposure within the filter slightly to create a gentle spotlight effect. Next, I'll adjust the temperature slider within the radial filter, adding a touch of warmth. This helps the light feel like it's casting a soft, warm glow on the lookout, drawing the eye naturally. Finally, I'll add a subtle increase to the contrast and texture across the image to bring out the colors and emphasize the lighting adjustments we made. Enhancing light with local adjustments helps bring a natural yet engaging edit to your photo. Warmer tones typically also attract more attention, so using a slight temperature increase can help create a golden hour feel even when the scene is overcast. This final step is going to guide the viewer's eye to the heart of the image, making them feel like they're drawn in by the light. Small adjustments here make a big difference in directing the focus and creating atmosphere. And that is it. By following these 5 steps, you've instantly created more contrast, depth, and focus to your image. So let's recap what we just went over. First, identify the light source in your scene. After that, consider how it affects your scene. Next, adjust for the type of light. We have hard, soft, and ambient light. Next is to focus on the shadows to create more contrast, and finally enhance the light to guide your viewer's eye. These steps give you a roadmap to make the most out of natural light, working with what's already there and create an impactful image. So I hope you all learned something from this week's video, but if you didn't already know, I started a Discord server for the entire community to come together, share photos, and give feedback, and then at the end of every month, I'll be selecting one of your photos as a monthly contest winner. Other than that, if you could subscribe to my weekly newsletter for weekly updates, and then for vlog, blog, and other video updates, if you could like and follow my Facebook page. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.